Hello, my name is Margaret Graziano, and I'm the host of Work Liberated. Today, I welcome Dr. Margaret Paul, who is the author of the co-author or co-creator of the inner bonding process. And welcome, Dr. Paul.
Thank you so much.
So I first met Dr. Margaret Paul when I was looking to do some deeper work around my leadership and on this new chapter of my life, which is authoring the book Ignite Culture and really raising my impact in the world. And I knew there was something that I wasn't quite getting to, and I couldn't get there with traditional coaching. So I started working with her earlier this year. And what I've really learned for myself is, who do I need to be for me first before I could look at who others needed to be for me or who I needed to be for others. And so, Dr. Paul, I'd like you to talk a little bit about what is inner bonding and what does it have to do with helping people be a better leader?
So inner bonding is a 6-step pathway towards learning to love yourself, see who you are, deeply value yourself, learn how to take loving care of yourself. Most people have no idea what it means to love or truly care about themselves. They think, oh, I'll take a bath or get my nails done. That's not what it's about. It's mostly about learning to take emotional responsibility, physical responsibility, financial responsibility, relationship responsibility, spiritual responsibility, organizational responsibility. Many people never think in those terms. And so this process is very powerful, as you're learning, to really help you tune in to what you need to be doing to take loving care of yourself, because we train people in how to treat us. And if we're abandoning ourselves, which most people have learned to do in many different ways, then we wonder why others are treating us badly. But others might be treating us very much the way we're treating ourselves. And that's a big problem. So learning to really see and value and treat yourself with love and respect goes a long way towards good leadership.
So let's talk about some real life examples. So let's say I'm in a leadership role and I'm a CEO, and the people on my executive team are just having a really hard time honoring the company values, or they say, yeah. But then when the rubber hits the road, there are no values. And so that's typical person that I would coach. I got to get people to do what I want them to do. So how do you begin the process of people are not behaving in a way I want them to behave? So are you saying that has to do with something with the way that I'm behaving?
Yeah, well, it has to do with how you're treating yourself.
Okay.
Very often leaders are very much in their head and they're external and they're trying to control things on the external level, but they're completely ignoring what they're feeling. And most people don't realize that our feelings are a source of inner guidance. Our feelings of anxiety and depression, guilt, shame, anger, aloneness, emptiness, annoyance, jealousy, things like that are letting us know that we're actually abandoning ourselves. We may be judging ourselves. We may be ignoring our feelings. We may be turning to various addictions, food, alcohol, drugs, or we may be handing over to other people handing our feelings over to other people to get their approval, making others responsible for whether or not we feel okay about ourselves, whether we feel worthy, whether we feel lovable or okay. So these are all forms of self-abandonment. And when people are doing that, then there's no way that others are not picking that up. So you're not, if you're not honoring your own values, if you're not respecting who you are, how can you expect other people to do that?
So let's be super specific. So let's say me in my own company that I have a challenge around accountability, which is actually true. I've been working on it for really working on it for the last year. But so I'll say, this is my standard. This is what I need people to do. And by the way, I attract a lot of clients who are the same way. So this is what I need done. But then I also have this competing thing that says, people have to like me. I want them to want to work for me. So if I hold them accountable, they might say, screw you, I'm out of here. I don't need this kind of hassle every day. How do you reconcile that? Like, just use me as an example. How do I reconcile? I need people to perform. I have goals, but I have this, and sometimes I'm not even conscious that I really want people to want to be here. And I have this fear is if I hold them accountable, especially when they're not doing what I need them to do, then that'll create conflict.
Yeah. So the need to have people like you and approve of you is coming from what I call self-abandonment. It means that you are not deeply seeing, valuing, liking, approving of yourself. There's self-judgments going on, and you're basically handing over to your employees the responsibility to make you feel like you're okay. The minute you do that, this is energetic. It's not like people are talking about doing that. It's an energy. So when you're needing approval from your employees, they feel it and they lose respect. We always lose respect for people who pull on us for their approval, who tiptoe around, who don't, hold us to the standards that we've said we need. And so you lay out the standards, but then you don't say anything. And you're afraid of what they're going to feel. They pick up that energy. They lose respect. They know they can get away with it at that point because you're abandoning yourself. This is a very big issue with most people. They don't realize that the ways that they're abandoning themselves are getting reflected by the people around you. So you're not keeping to your standards. Why should they? You're not respecting you. Why should they?
It's interesting because Patrick Lencioni is a business guru guy, 5 dysfunctions of a team, 5 temptations of a CEO, but he talks about this thing called artificial harmony. And then Dr. Fernando Flores talks about cordial hypocrisy. And it's kind of 2 sides of the exact same coin.
Right.
I say I want A, but I step over it. And then the energetically, people are saying she doesn't really want that. And they might not even say that, but it's their feeling. So how do I stop that? Because most leaders are super frustrated around this thing, accountability. And then as soon as the economy takes a hit, then we're laying everybody off. So how do people for themselves, the listeners, how do they, if they know they have this need for approval and they know they sort of suck around accountability, what do they do about it?
Well, this is what the inner bonding process is about. And anybody can learn this process. They can go to our website, innerbonding.com, many ways, many books, courses, ways of learning the process. But the first step is the willingness to move out of mind focus and into body focus, because virtually all of us, when we were kids, we learned to avoid our pain because we couldn't handle it by going up in our head. But that's like having a baby and putting the baby asleep and going out to lunch and not hearing the baby cry. And the baby's going to be traumatized, right? But you don't do that if you want to be a good parent. Well, if you want to be a good inner parent, you don't stay up in your head. You don't ignore your feelings. You open to learning. And this is basic to inner bonding because there's really only 2 intentions. You can either open to learning about how you're treating yourself, how you're abandoning yourself, what's loving to yourself, or you can avoid that and protect and try and control other people to get them to do it for you. And that's where you lose accountability with people, because as I said, they can feel that pull and they lose respect. So the first step is learning to get inside your body. And this is not easy for most people. It wasn't easy for me because I learned, like you, to try and get approval from other people and to be external. I was tuned into other people's feelings, but not mine.
Yeah.
And so it took a while for me to get inside my body, be aware of what I felt, and then want responsibility for those. That's step 1, is being aware and wanting responsibility.
Now hold right there. Wanting responsibility. What does that mean? I'll tell you, as a listener, wanting responsibility. So if I'm feeling taken advantage of, that's kind of how I roll. If you work with me and you don't do what you're supposed to do, but you charge me and I pay you, now I feel like a victim because I'm paying you and you should do it.
That's right. Okay. So you would breathe inside and you would become aware of feeling like a victim. Become aware of the anxiety, the stress of feeling like a victim and feeling taken advantage of.
Yeah.
Wanting responsibility means you want to know what you're doing, how you're treating yourself. That's allowing that to happen.
So I'm not blaming them for not being responsible. I'm not blaming my people.
Yeah.
I'm
right.
looking at me.
Yeah, that's right. You're looking at you. So you're aware that you're feeling like a victim, you're upset, you're angry, you might be blaming them, you're feeling taken advantage of, but you want to learn what you're doing. And in step 2, you open to learning. You shift your intention from controlling to learning, from avoiding to learning. And you focus in your heart, and we teach people to open to their higher self, a higher form of love and truth and wisdom and strength, and to just invite that in. And then in step 3, we're going inside and we're saying, what am I telling you? How am I treating you? What am I doing or not doing that's putting you in this position of being taken advantage of? And very often what we're doing is a repeat of how we were treated by our parents or how our parents treated themselves. We absorbed into what we call our ego wounded self, all the ways of controlling and protecting and avoiding. And we end up treating ourselves that way without realizing it. So you would go inside and you would say, well, how am I treating myself? What am I telling myself that's putting me in this victim position to be taken advantage of? And if you were to ask that of yourself, what do you think you would find on that inner level?
Well, it's so interesting that you ask, because when you said like learned behavior, I don't know if you said it just like that, but I have a mom who I love very much, and she's super martyrish. Like, she'll be the only person cooking on Thanksgiving when you can ask 12 people to help. Or she'll just go over and over and over. And in my brain, and she also was the kind of person who didn't pay herself very much money, but always gave her employees bonus. She cooked for them. And it's funny because I would say I'm nothing like her. But when it comes to holding people accountable,
yeah, you are.
I'll go way too long. And did you ask what do I tell myself?
Yeah. What do you I mean, it sounds like what you're telling yourself is that, oh no, if I confront them, they're going to be mad at me and they're going to leave me.
Yeah. And then they'll tell people that I'm too hard on them. And
see,
and that's
so
like,
right. So as long as you're telling yourself that, then you're putting yourself in the victim spot. You're making what they think of you more important than whether or not you're truly treating yourself with kindness and caring and respect. You're not. When you're telling yourself, oh no, we can't say anything. We have to give ourselves up. We have to be overly nice so that they'll like us. That's complete self-abandonment.
Yeah. So that's really helpful, especially for people that are managing and leading others. And everybody really does want to be free. People say, I want autonomy in my job. I want personal empowerment. I want to feel engaged. So let's take this conversation from the leader to, there's a lot of people in the job market right now. A lot of people are looking for jobs. Tech sector has laid a ton of people off. And what I'm reading about is for professionals, every ad, there's, 500 people applying, not for lower level, but for professionals. How do I not abandon myself in the job search process? Because one of the things that I got into doing culture, I used to do recruiting, and I could always tell the people who just wanted a job because their wife was going to kick them out of the house, or their husband or their parent was going to kick them out of the house, versus the people who had a calling and wanted to contribute. So
and how did you tell that?
How could I tell?
What were you picking up?
Their energy, and also the superficiality of the way they answered the questions. Like there was no thought, there was no depth of how they were answering the questions. It was almost like bad interview 101, because they
Yeah, they were coming from here. They weren't coming from their heart, and you could
Yeah.
feel the
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah,
Okay.
but
So
not,
somebody's looking for a job.
yeah,
If they're abandoning themselves, they're not going to get the job because they're coming from here. The other person can pick it up, even if they're not aware of what they're picking up. They're going to be picking up how that person is treating themselves, how they're feeling about themselves, that they don't think they're good enough, that they've got to impress this person. Whereas if they're interviewing somebody who's really connected on the heart and soul level, who is with themselves, who values themselves, the other person's going to pick that up and value them.
yeah. So it's interesting because I would say from practical experience, half the time the interviewer is even present enough to pick up anything, because most of the time, so this is how weird the world of work is. The person doing the interviewing is desperate to fill the job. They're abandoning their self
That's
because they
right.
just want a butt in a seat. The person interviewing for the job just wants a paycheck. They all get hired. They have a miserable experience and they do the circle over and over again. As a candidate, how do I stop that so that I can actually fulfill my heart's desire through my work? How do I stop that?
But again, I mean, you can't stop who the interviewer is, but
Correct.
you can stop treating yourself badly. You can learn to see and value. Now, we all have this incredible essence, and this is what most people don't know. We have this beautiful essence that is love, and that has gifts, and that is vital and alive and has a calling and is excited about life. But if we're coming from up here, we're not accessing that. And most people don't even know about that part of themselves. And so part of the inner bonding process is discovering who they really are in their soul, in their true soul essence, who they came in as, what their gifts are, what their calling is, what they're excited about. You have an interview, and even if that person is out to lunch, you have an interview and you're excited about who you are and what you're offering. That person's going to be impressed.
So it sounds like, well, certainly the people doing the interviewing, but the people looking for work really need to do some homework of their own to
Right.
connect with themselves at a deeper level, to
Right.
really look at who am I and how can I make the difference that I'm meant to make before they even start doing interviews.
Yeah, there's a big difference between expressing who you are because you're valuing yourself, and expressing who you are to get value from somebody else. It's a completely different energy. And that's why it's so important to learn to value yourself before you go on an interview. And this is what they can go to the website. There's a free 7-day course. There's plenty of books. There's other courses. They can learn this. Doesn't take forever. And if they were to take a few weeks to really learn how to value themselves, and I mean, it's going to take longer than that over time, but at least to begin, they would do a much, much better interview.
At even right now, what could someone do? What can be an exercise somebody could do to learn to value themselves? Is it the same thing you just said about accountability?
Yeah, imagine that you have a baby. I know you have kids, and when you had a baby, did you value the baby?
Totally.
Why?
Totally.
Why?
I loved the baby. I mean, I was
Why?
just,
Why? Did the
I
baby have to perform for you to love it?
no,
No, that's right. Why not?
no, because I just, everything in me was just so in love with this little creature. And
But
I
also,
actually felt like I was pulled magnetically to care for this child.
the child came in full of love. I mean, I remember when my kids were born, full of love and innocence. And
Yeah.
of course, we didn't know exactly who they were, but all three of my kids were very different from the very beginning. And I could feel a lot of their essence and value that. They didn't have to perform for me to value, that your kids didn't have to perform for you to value them. And that's the same thing on the inner level. We have to reach a place where we're valuing who we intrinsically are, that we don't have to perform to have value. Most people, they define their value by how they look and how they perform and what their accomplishments are, rather than by their kindness, their caring, their compassion, their integrity, their honesty, their generosity. These are intrinsic qualities, their ability to love. These are intrinsic qualities, and they're special gifts. Everybody's got special gifts that each person needs to learn to see and value. When you do that and you go for an interview, that energy is being transmitted. That energy is being picked up, and that interviewer will say, wow, this person's amazing.
Yeah. So as you were talking, so let's go out of the interviewer back into the leader. I don't know why my camera's getting fuzzy, but you look good. So that's all that matters. So I had a lot of people are getting sick right now. And so I had a client who was out for the count for 2 weeks, and specifically very, very sick for 5 days. And he said, as he was laying on the couch, all he could deal with is the guilt that he felt for laying on the couch. And all of his demons, and this guy's like a CEO. He's accomplished a lot, and he continues to accomplish a lot. But he said he was like wrestling with the angel and the devil and the angel and the devil and the angel and the devil.
That's
you
right.
loser, why are you laying around? You should be doing more. So then he goes to work. Nobody was there. It was over the holiday. And he gives a 12-hour day. And then he goes back home and he hits the couch because he can't now move because he relapsed. So what is this monkey business where people, especially the hyperachievers, just don't give themselves a break to chill out?
But remember, I said that one of the major ways of abandoning oneself is self-judgment. And that part that you're talking about, that devil, which we call the ego wounded self, is going to judge you. What's the matter with you? You're a jerk. Get off the couch. You got to do better. You got to accomplish, and just goes after us, because that part just wants to control. That person wants to control the outcome, wants to control how people feel about him. It's all about control. If his intention was to love himself, to value himself, to see himself, he would behave completely differently. But he's not even asking, what's in my highest good? What's loving to me? He's just pushing and pushing and judging. And guilt is one of the feelings that's called toxic guilt, where he's judging himself, but he hasn't actually done anything wrong. I mean, guilt is an important feeling when we've actually done something wrong, but toxic guilt is when we're judging ourselves when we haven't actually done anything wrong. And that's what he's doing. And he believes that that kind of judgment is what he needs to do to be successful. And meanwhile, he's making himself sicker. And a lot of people do this. There's a lot of sick people. And that's one of the reasons they're so sick. They're abandoning themselves. One of the things that I like to tell people, most people don't like to tell people their age, but I like to, because I like to inspire people, and that I am a very healthy, vibrant, 83-year-old person. And I work a lot, but I don't push. I don't judge. My work is an expression of who I am on the inner level, because I've done and continue to do my inner bonding work. And that's part of staying healthy. That's part of living a long life. I mean, there's a number of things we need to do. We need to eat well. I eat really, really well. But it's also seeing and valuing and loving yourself that is so vital for health and aliveness and loving relationships and accomplishing what you want to accomplish, being able to manifest your work without this judgment and pushing and losing yourself and giving yourself up. That's not healthy.
Yeah. So couple things now. I don't want to take us off track, but that kind of toxic guilt and driving oneself into maybe the grave, is
Right.
that how command and control got so out of hand with that command and control. Because as you're speaking, I'm like, well, that's everything we train people not to be, is like doing that to others. You need to get it done. And this work ethic gone crazy, that people are abandoning their families. And I mean, that's certainly how I was trained in a straight commission job. Like
Yeah.
if you're not producing more than you did last month, you're garbage. And literally in the 80s, that's how they used to talk to us. I mean, so how do we connect the dots from I abandon myself because I've got this wounded child who has to perform, and then that turns into how I manage and lead a company?
Yeah, well, because what happens when we abandon ourselves, and basically what happens is that we loathe ourselves. When we're abandoning ourselves, we're telling ourselves, like this guy, you're a jerk. What's the matter with you? You're not good enough. And so we're loathing ourselves and projecting that out, because that's what that ego wounded self does, is project our feelings about ourselves onto others and then have to control them. And this happens in work, it happens in relationships, it happens in education, where people are not taking good care of themselves and projecting their self-loathing. This is the basis of racism, sexism, misogyny, homophobia. It's the basis of all of that, is projected self-loathing from self-abandonment. That's why it's so important for our whole society to learn to see and value and love ourselves rather than abandon ourselves.
Yeah, it's as you say it, I'm like, it's so simple. We just have to like get back to the basics of kindness and love and contribution. And now I want to go to like, you've got these leaders that are working on themselves, and you probably don't spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, but in my field, I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, too much time. And there's always these notifications about how management is terrible and management is the culprit. But I see both sides. I go into companies and I work with management and I work with everybody else. And frankly, I think everybody is the solution and everybody is the problem.
That's right.
Because this projection thing, I'm an angry employee, I complain to another employee, I get another employee angry, and pretty soon, no matter what the manager does, they can't win.
That's right.
So how does the regular everyday employee say, wait a second, maybe I need some inner bonding, or how do people even know if they need to do their own spiritual development? Because that's really, I wasn't sent to you as a coach. I was sent to you as a spiritual leader, teacher who could help me tap into my highest level of power. And I already knew, though, that there was a higher level of power in me. I already knew it. So I was like, sure, I'll call her, of course. But the average everyday person, if everybody knew that they had a higher self within them, we wouldn't have racism. We wouldn't have systemic distrust. We wouldn't have the political chaos that's happening right now.
That's right. We wouldn't.
So how do people find out about this?
Well,
how do they know?
People seek it when they're unhappy enough. They get sick enough, they lose their job, they lose their relationship, their kids don't want to have anything to do with them. So something happens in their life, and that's usually when people find me and start to work with inner bonding, is something has happened. It's not working. It's not working. Everything that they've tried to do to control isn't working. And I get people who have said to me, I get so many people who said, I've been searching for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, but I never learned to see and value myself. And that's the problem. A lot of people are seekers. A lot of people do want to heal, but they don't know how, because they've never been taught a process. And that's really what inner bonding is. And anybody who wants to can learn it. And they don't have to spend a lot of money to learn it. There's many ways. And I just really want to encourage anybody who's listening, who's not happy. If you're depressed, if you're anxious, if things are falling apart for you, if you're stressed out all the time, if you don't have good health, learn how to love yourself. Learn to connect with your higher guidance. Learn to access that source of love and wisdom and vitality and energy. People often say to me, how do you have so much energy? How do you get so much done in a day? Because I do, I get so much done. And I don't use much of my own energy. I have learned to tap into this source of energy that's infinite. It's infinite, and it comes through, and it energizes you. And anybody can learn to do that. That is available for everybody. And it changes everything when you can tap into that source of energy and love and wisdom and strength. Changes everything.
Yeah. So in coaching school, basic coaching school, you don't need a spiritual psychology degree, but in the basic coaching school, the first thing they teach us is that it all begins with having a relationship with our higher self. Like if you're coaching somebody, the first thing you have to do is you don't have to do it, but you'll get way further with coaching is if you have people tap into that. And I remember the first time that I heard that, I was like, oh, how am I going to do this? It's so hard. But the truth is, it's never been hard. Everybody's like waiting and wanting. If they sign up for a coach, they want to have a breakthrough.
Yeah. But there's a couple of secrets to this. First of all, people have to know that our upper right brain we're born with the ability to connect in our upper right brain. And Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor, who's a friend of mine, wrote Whole Brain Living. She's a neuroscientist, and she talks about that we're naturally meant to access, but it's about frequency. And spirit exists at a higher frequency than we operate at. Like if we operated as fast as spirit, like a hummingbird's wings, we wouldn't see each other. So we have to be able to raise our frequency to access that wisdom and that strength and that love that we need to know we're not alone. And it takes basically two things. It took me quite a while to understand this. One is we have to truly be open to learning. We cannot get there if our intention is to control. That just tanks the frequency. It makes us feel miserable, and we cannot get there from that space. So we have to be open to learning about loving ourselves, sharing our love with others. Two is we have to keep our body clean. People used to access spirit easier before a couple hundred years ago, because they were eating clean, organic, natural food. But then the food industry came in, and people started eating, factory farm food and processed food and tons of sugar and chemicals. And the body can't handle this. This does not give the body the building blocks it needs. It lowers the frequency. So fortunately for me, I was a sickly kid, and I learned in my early 20s, which was a long time ago, about good eating. And so when inner bonding came in, spirit brought in inner bonding and helped me to understand about the intention to learn, then I had always wanted to connect at will. Connection at will is really important to me. I couldn't do it until inner bonding, and then I did. But that's because I was already eating really well. It took me a while to understand that it takes those two things, the frequency of your body, so that you're taking physical responsibility for your health and well-being, and the frequency of your mind, your intention. And then you will find that it's very easy to access that guidance.
So this is why people cleanse, and this is why people meditate.
That's right. Yeah,
So,
but you see, they can meditate and they can connect, but if the rest of the time they're abandoning themselves, they lose the connection the rest of the day. Inner bonding is like an ongoing meditation where you're conscious of your intention. You're conscious of being open to learning rather than controlling. You're conscious of what you're putting in your body. You're conscious of how you feel. That's the issue.
Well, it's an all-day affair.
It's 24/7, just like with a baby.
Yeah.
24/7.
Yeah. So it's interesting. You said something earlier, and it reminded me of a quote. I think the guy's name is Alain de Botton. I'm not saying it right. He's French. But the largest part of what we call personality is determined by how we've opted to defend ourselves against anxiety and sadness. And so when I say that to people like in the workplace, they're like, oh, you've got to be kidding. My personality was not created because of sadness or anxiety. And, psychology and philosophy and sociology and anthropology say different. Like as children, as little kids, something happens and we do something and then we start creating this layering. Can you
That's
speak?
right.
I know we only have a few minutes left, but can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, the personality, the way he may be defining it is how we define the wounded self, which usually people think that's who they are because they don't know who they are. And so that becomes the personality. And that is created to defend against pain, against anxiety, depression, sadness. That's why we created as children, because we can't handle those feelings when we're little kids. And if we don't have somebody around helping us learn to handle those, then of course we learn to avoid them. And that is the personality. So he's 100% right about that. And so often people think that's who they are. It is not who they are. They are not their personality. They are their soul. And they need to get to know that.
How do we tell manufacturing companies, the people running manufacturing companies, that they are their soul? Or automotive?
We don't tell them. We become who we want ourselves to be. I just let love be my guiding light. I let kindness and truth and integrity be my guiding light. That's all I can do for myself. I can't make other people do it. But there's something very, very important here. And that is the more you learn to listen to and trust yourself, the less you follow others. If you think about, for example, Hitler, people followed him because they didn't listen and trust themselves. And this happens all over the world. People become followers of these sociopathic leaders or these heads of companies thinking they know what they're talking about. But when we learn who we are, we learn to value and trust who we are, we don't follow. And if everybody stopped following those people, we wouldn't have the problems that we have.
Yeah, I know we have to wrap up soon, but I want to say in the book that that I'm writing, that is going to be released in about 2 weeks, chapter 2 is all about taking a hard look in the mirror for the leaders. And I open the chapter with a story about a guy standing in front of an audience of his employees, coming clean about what an asshole he's been for the last 20 years. And he's weeping. And this is a total true story. I had coached him for a year. And then finally it was time that we took the executive team and they started bringing it to the rest. And it was a very heavy manufacturing, command and control. You are only as good as your last, widget that you manufactured. So anyways, up there and he's asking for forgiveness and his boss was infuriated. And the whole story is rolled out in this chapter 2. And the boss was infuriated and he was like, grown men don't cry. And what happened in this company, because of his leadership and his counterparts' leadership, not the big boss, is they went from a toxic, hateful, 2 weeks away from a full walkout to a loving, kind, collaborative. They had the best 5 years on record.
That's great.
But the big boss still would not embrace the principles of authenticity and kindness and generosity. It was against everything he stood for. And what's interesting about this company is we worked with 3 divisions. All 3 had remarkable results, but corporate only interested in one thing.
Yeah.
And that's profit. And people still follow like sheep. And like this company has more lawsuits. They have people dying there. It's just amazing to me that the average everyday human being wouldn't say something is wrong here. So anyway, do you have any thoughts on why people keep following? It's just they don't know any better, or?
I recently read a really great book called The Sociopath Next Door, and it was an eye-opener about the fact that 1 in 25 people, that's 4% of the population, are sociopath, which means they have no conscience, They can do anything without any guilt, without any shame, without any remorse. And we look
And they
around
don't
the
even know
world.
they're doing it? Do they even know they're doing
Oh,
it?
they know they're doing it, but they get joy out of winning. Oh, it's only about winning. If you look around the world at so many of the people, for example, Putin, it's about winning. It doesn't matter how many people he hurts or kills. Doesn't matter that he's decimating a country. He doesn't care. He's a sociopath. And so many of the heads of companies are, or they're narcissists, and they have no empathy and they don't care, and they'll do anything to get what they want. They'll do anything to win. And I once read another book, From Good to Great. You've probably read that book.
Yep, Jim Collins, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great book, that the real good companies are run by caring people, not by these narcissistic, controlling people. They're the ones that went downhill, but the ones that went from good to great are the ones that are kind and caring and take care of people and interview everybody to see what's necessary in the company. That's what makes a good leader. But the problem is the rest of the people who don't particularly want to be leaders have got to learn not to be followers. They need to follow their own heart, not a narcissistic or sociopathic leader. That's what's causing so many problems.
Wow, what a great way to put a period at the end of the sentence. But I have one more question.
Yeah.
How do you know if you're working for a sociopath or a narcissist?
Well, that's why I suggest people actually read the book and begin to understand what these are. It's not so easy to understand. I was brought up by two sociopathic narcissistic parents, not sociopath, but narcissistic parents. It took me forever, even many years as a therapist, to understand that I was actually raised by two narcissistic parents. So it's not easy to see, and people have to do their research. They have to learn about it in order to understand it. I can't just say, oh, here's how you know.
Yeah, because I notice a lot of people are accusing other people of being narcissists. And sometimes I read their blogs and I'm like, well, you're the narcissist.
Yeah, that's right. Very often they are. And that's the projection.
Yeah. So thank you, Margaret Paul. How do people find you?
They can go to innerbonding.com. They can contact us there. There's phone numbers, there's emails. There's so much on the website. It's a very big site, and we offer a tremendous amount of information for people to learn inner bonding.
Great. Well, thank you for being a guest on Work Liberated. I appreciate your time. Thank you for the work you're doing with me and all the people I touch. And we'll look forward to talking to you again.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.